Today, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a primer on how stress and autoimmune disease are related because they are. Everyone has a propensity to, manifest an autoimmune disease. All of our cells are coded with that possibility. Just like, hey Tara, just like our cells are, coded for cancer, possibly. Like, hey Christy. These things happen, right? We all have the propensity to get sick. But you guys, stress is a huge trigger for autoimmune disease. And the more I work in this field, the more women and children that I meet with, the more I see, the relationship between one's emotional state and your mental state, and then the manifestation of autoimmune disease. As an autoimmune disease sufferer myself, like, why would I be in this field if I weren't, intimately associated with what I'm talking about, right? And why am I here to begin with? I realize that really the mental and emotional stressors, hey Karen, are absolutely associated with autoimmune disease. So we're going to talk about why that is and what you can do about it, which is, what everybody wants to know. What the heck can I do about it? So a study from 2008, Stoyanovich et al. Found that 50% of autoimmune disease manifests without a trigger factor. So we don't know why you got autoimmune disease. If you go into your doctor and you're tested positive for TPO antibodies and they say you have Hashimoto's, or you're tested positive for ANA antibodies and they say you have a lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, most of the time your doctor will tell you we don't know why that is. Fibromyalgia, some type 1 diabetes, all of these autoimmune diseases. Anyone on the spectrum of autoimmune disease will tell you, we don't know why you get this. But in my practice, and perhaps you yourself, we've observed the fact that it's usually an extenuating circumstance, a trigger factor. Hey, Dina, that really, precedes you getting your autoimmune disease. And that's actually true. That from the same article, Stoyanovich et al., 2008, it was found that 80% of people who manifested with autoimmune disease had an uncommon emotional stress as a precedent to getting autoimmune disease. What's up, Erica? So you want to obviously mitigate stress in your life. You can't control the stresses that are coming at you. For a lot of women, it's not necessarily just uncommon emotional stress. It can be a traumatic event. It could be a death. It could be a divorce. It could be a difficult time in your marriage. It could be, working and going to school at the same time. It could be having your first kid or having your fifth kid. It could be doing too much in ministry. It can be doing too much in philanthropy or in, helping your kids at school. It's really just too much, right? And we know intuitively, women know we're doing too much. There is no other time in history that women have had to do as many things as we have to do today. Even just a generation ago, when you think about like your own mom, maybe she worked, maybe she worked part-time, but she certainly wasn't doing everything that we are doing today, and not as quickly as we're doing it as well, right? So, really our mom's generation was the first generation to suffer from these higher levels of autoimmune disease. And again, the big ones I see, and that many of you probably are, again, intimately, familiar with: Hashimoto's disease, celiac disease, Crohn's, type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and fibromyalgia. Those are all what we call idiopathic diseases, where it just means we don't know what the trigger factor was. But, I can tell you, and again, this intuitively, it really is that accumulation of stress that leads to your body fighting back, right? So how does that happen? It's this kind of like really horrible cycle of stress, that causes autoimmune disease and other chronic illnesses. And then that itself, that disease is a stress on your body. And so it's disease, stress, and it kind of perpetuates itself until you take proactive steps to really pull back stress in your life. And that's outside stress and inside stress. Good morning, Kim. Your body being sick or suffering from inflammation is definitely a stressor. So when I talk to women and they say, I don't really feel stressed, but they're presenting with TPO antibodies or ANA antibodies or high levels of markers like homocysteine or C-reactive protein or low levels of vitamin D, I can tell that their body is stressed from the inside out. If you're not sleeping well, that's a stress on your body. If you're over exercising, that's a stress on your body. If you're over dieting, or, on the other hand, like overeating or binge eating because your body is not in balance, those are all stressors on the body. And so again, it's just that, that perpetuating cycle of, your body's stressed out. And so it releases these stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, and noradrenaline. And a lot of women, will come to me and we can test cortisol in the body, right? And adrenaline and noradrenaline too. But at some point, your body kind of, it doesn't actually run out of cortisol, but you've heard the term like adrenal dysfunction or HPA axis dysfunction or adrenal fatigue, right? And essentially what that means is your body doesn't have the raw materials to make enough of its stress hormone, which is cortisol. And so, or it outputs too much cortisol for too long of a time, an extended period of time. And this is when your backup generator comes online. So your backup hormones like adrenaline. And, I'll use this example with women in my practice. Like, how do you feel, after you narrowly miss a car accident? How do you feel, after a fight with your spouse or during a fight with your spouse? How do you feel after like a, crazy text from your mother-in-law? You have an elevated heart rate. Your face gets hot. You feel like, hi, Sarah. You feel like you can, run really fast or yell at someone, that's your fight or flight response. And it's adrenaline kicking in, it really is that, kind of past response that our bodies are just genetically programmed for, where you either have to like run from a tiger, or stay and fight that tiger, right? That's what we mean by fight or flight response. And it's an upset in your body's stress hormones where you're not balanced, you're not even, you're ready for a fight. So after a while, that primary stress hormone that you should be outputting on a daily basis, a little bit of cortisol getting you through the day, waking you up, kind of like depressing later on in the day, and finally being very subdued at night so you can get to sleep, right? You will either have higher levels of cortisol throughout the day, or your cortisol levels will essentially be depleted and your backup stress hormones come online. So that's when women start experiencing panic attacks, anxiety, insomnia, inability to sleep, or just relax during the day. And if that's you, that you could be getting close to, manifesting an autoimmune disease because your body's under a constant state of stress. And we've already established that too much stress, too many of those stress hormones can trigger things that are called cytokines. So inflammatory cytokines. We haven't established that. I'm telling you now. All right. Inflammatory cytokines, or just cytokines in general, are messengers. So it's another hormone that your body puts out, but there are inflammatory cytokines which can cause autoimmune disease. Really, not cause, but be a cofactor for manifesting autoimmune disease. Your body's under too much stress. It outputs cortisol and adrenaline. That triggers a response in the body where the body releases these substances called cytokines, and cytokines will promote inflammation in the body. So stay with me. You can look for these. You can look to see if your body's under a state of inflammation or stress by testing the following labs. Number one, cholesterol. Cholesterol is not a bad thing. I have to talk people out of the fact that, they think high cholesterol is a bad thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Your body absolutely needs cholesterol in order to create the rest of its hormone cascade. So estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, DHEA, all of that, beautiful symphony of hormones that your body should produce in balance all the time, it can't do if you don't have sufficient amounts of cholesterol. This is why statins are the worst idea for women. We're seeing this influx of dementia and autoimmune disease after a generation of women has been put on statins. If you don't have enough cholesterol, your brain is not going to be healthy, and you cannot make some of those protective hormones like estrogen. So high cholesterol isn't a bad thing. Too high of cholesterol can show us that your body is under a state of stress, though. Cholesterol is likened to like a fire truck, right? So if you've got inflammation in the body, that's like the fire. Cholesterol is the fire truck that your liver puts out in order to quell that inflammation or dampen the inflammation to, reduce the fire, to put out the fire, right? So if you have high cholesterol, it's associated with high inflammation in the body. So that's one marker, right? Now, if it's relatively high cholesterol, you're fine, right? If your LDL is in like the 250, 350 range, that is what we'd actually call elevated cholesterol. If you're somewhere between 150 and 200 on your LDL, that's still fine. That's protective for women, actually. And I wrote a blog about this a while back, but LDL, elevated LDL, slightly elevated LDL, is actually more protective against all-cause mortality than low LDL. So what that tells us is that women who have slightly elevated LDL, that, less healthy cholesterol, right, that people will say, women who have elevated LDL will die of less disease than women who have low LDL. So it tells us that cholesterol is somewhat protective. Now, HDL is different, right? You want high HDL. And in my practice, we focus on whole animal foods, and that tends to raise your HDL, which is more cardioprotective and really better outcomes for all-cause mortality if you've got, higher HDL. So you will survive, theoretically, from disease better if your HDL is higher, and really if your LDL is slightly high. Okay. So cholesterol isn't a bad thing. High cholesterol isn't a bad thing. For the love of Pete, don't go on a statin just because your doctor offers it to you, okay? You do need that cholesterol, especially if you're a woman. The other markers that you can test for elevated cytokines in your body, so elevated inflammation, are vitamin D. If you have low vitamin D, and almost everyone I test does, then your body is inflamed. As you move farther away from the equator, studies have shown that all disease rises. So incidence of all diseases will rise the farther you are away from the equator. What does that tell us? It tells us that the sunlight, right, and vitamin D that we get from the sunlight is protective against all diseases. Now, this is diseases from autism to cancer to type 1 diabetes. There's this man, Jeff Bowles, Bowles, that actually has a blog article that shows, graph after graph after graph of all of these diseases that women deal with and humans deal with today, and how, again, the incidence of them rise the farther you get away from the equator. Again, test your vitamin D and see how high it is. I like to see it between 80 and 100 nanomoles per deciliter, and really the standard of care is 30 or higher. So that's really not enough, especially if you're dealing with autoimmune disease. Work to get your vitamin D up, but be very careful. Vitamin D is a pro-hormone. It's also fat soluble, so you don't want to take giant amounts of vitamin D, especially if your blood calcium levels are not appropriate or you're dealing with a parathyroid issue. So these are all reasons to kind of get a hold of me, work with somebody who knows what they're doing, because you don't want to take fat soluble vitamins willy-nilly. And if your vitamin D levels are low, there's other things going on. But a good place to start is to test your vitamin D. So you're testing cholesterol and vitamin D. The third marker you can test for inflammation is C-reactive protein, or CRP. That's a very, inexpensive test that doctors test for all the time. C-reactive protein is generally a level of cardio inflammation, so cardiovascular inflammation. How are your arteries doing? How is your heart doing? If your CRP is elevated, then, we have to take some steps to really work on your cardiovascular health. And there are ways you can do that through diet, exercise, and stress relief, supplementation, all of the things that we do as functional nutritionists, right? The last thing you can check for is homocysteine. Homocysteine is another marker of inflammation, and it's something that your doctor will absolutely test for. If all 4 of those markers are high, you know that you could be close to having some antibodies for autoimmune disease, right? Now, again, this happens for a lot of people, and it's not the end of the world. Say you present with some TPO antibodies, TG antibodies, ANA antibodies, not the end of the world. Many of us do. Just because you present with those antibodies, number 1, does not necessarily mean Number 2, it's not the end of the world. We reverse antibodies in my practice all the time. I've done it myself. I've done it with a lot of other, other people in my practice. It's doable, right? It does take work. There is no pill for autoimmune disease. You do have to work on the 5 pillars of health: diet, rest, exercise, stress relief, supplementation. But, it's easier when you're working with someone, right? So that's what we do. All right. I wanted to talk to you too about the vacation phenomenon. People who do have autoimmune disease really should stay away from, some of the allergens. As a nutritionist, that's what I do. We work with diet first. So if you're presenting with celiac, if you're presenting with Hashimoto's, if you're presenting with lupus or fibromyalgia, you should be staying away from foods that are inflammatory to your body, right? If you have markers of inflammation, you want to reduce inflammation, not increase inflammation. When you're exhausted, all you want to do is eat like bread and butter. I totally get it. But you do have to take a step, and really think about what is your long-term health going to look like. You don't want to be, 80 years old, 70 years old, 60 years old in bed, not being able to get out of bed because your rheumatoid arthritis has attacked your body in such a way where you can't move to take care of your kids or grandkids, right? So put in the work now when you can, to prevent those things. All right. Vacation phenomenon. When people travel, they're like, I'm gluten intolerant in the United States, but when I go to France or when I go to Europe, I can eat all the bread I want. And, number one, that's true. There is a soil difference over there. There is, a care about food and ingredients over in Europe that we don't necessarily have all, in the United States. But there's also a reduction of stress when you're on vacation. You don't have to do all of the things you have to do here. All of your responsibilities change. You're there for enjoyment and pleasure instead of frustration and stress that you really, we tend to build into our life on a daily basis here. So what happens when you travel? Your inflammatory cytokines go down. You're outputting less cortisol. You're outputting less adrenaline. And as a result of that, again, your inflammatory cytokines will go down. So that mitigates some of the symptoms of your autoimmune disease. So what if we could bring that vacation phenomenon into our lives here? Can we do that? Really, the choice is up to you. A lot of people will say, well, I have to do this. I have to be my kid's room mom. I have to serve in Sunday school every week. I have to drive my kids here and there, blah, blah, blah. I get it. I have 4 kids. I am a mom. I'm married. I got a business. I'm in school. Like, I get it. It is stressful. Like, it will eat you alive if you let it, right? But what you can do, I get a thumbs up there. Yeah. What you can do is start building things into your day that are non-negotiables that really help you reduce your level of stress. So I'm going to give you 3 that we do. The first one is outside time. I guarantee you, whoever you are watching this video, if you test your vitamin D levels, they are going to be low, like 100%. Even if you live in Bakersfield in the desert, and you're outside all the time, your vitamin D levels are going to be low. I don't know exactly why that is yet, but I'm going to figure it out. Maybe, hopefully, God willing. Why all of our vitamin D levels are so low. There tends to be an issue with the vitamin D receptor on the body, that we're blunting the receptors on our bodies through inflammatory substances like gluten, dairy, sugar, alcohol, coffee, through stress, through other cofactors that aren't there, like, our B vitamins and magnesium and other things that really affect the VDR, right? The vitamin D receptor. Regardless, get outside, get a little bit more of natural vitamin D. I encourage my clients to be outside for 15 minutes a day, just 15 minutes. This isn't time on your phone. It's not time, even talking to someone. It's not time where you're like stressing. It's just like getting a blanket or laying on a lawn chair for 15 minutes. Listen to music if you want to. If you're dying to read a book, do that. Don't make it a boring book. Like, make it a fun book, like an enjoyable book. Don't read for school or for, work. Read for fun if that's something you want to do, or take a nap in the sun 15 minutes a day. Even if you've had melanoma, even if you are worried about like burning, you can cover your head, making sure that maybe just your arms or feet are exposed, but you need that vitamin D. Okay. That's step number 1, 15 minutes of outside time / vitamin D a day. Number 2 is my favorite, the Epsom salt bath. So every woman I know is deficient in magnesium. If you never poop, if you're constipated, like most of my clients, you need more magnesium. If you're an insomniac, if you can't sleep or you don't get deep and restful sleep, you need magnesium. If you've ever gone through periods of extreme stress, you need magnesium. It's really dumps during times of stress. So make sure you're getting some magnesium. But if you've got impaired gut function, you're not going to absorb oral magnesium as well as you will transdermal magnesium. That just means through the skin, trans across, dermal skin, right? So you can get Epsom salts and put it in your bath, 1 to 2 cups, like a crap ton of Epsom salt. Go get it from Costco, not like Sprouts, right? And put it in a really hot bath with some essential oils if you want to. And take like a 30-minute bath. Again, that's not a time when you're catching up on work, when your kids are in there bothering you. Lock the door, put on, your chill music, Pandora station, close your eyes, light a candle, and that is your stress time. A lot of women will push back all of the thoughts they have during the day to nighttime. They'll stuff them down. They won't consider, what their brain's trying to do. And so by the time bedtime comes around, women are wide awake, stressing out about everything that they hadn't thought about during the day, working through problems that their brain should have worked through at 2 p.m., but they, just kept stuffing those thoughts down because they were busy. So now, it's 10:30 and you're exhausted, but you can't get to sleep, right? So take your 30 minutes in the bathtub and leave a journal, by your bathtub. I encourage women to do that. I'm looking around for my journal. It's not here. Okay. Cute pens, journal. I don't care if you're a dude or a lady, like journal out some of your thoughts, solve some of those problems that you can't solve at 10:30 at night, and be proactive during your bath time. If that stresses you out, just lay in the bath. All right, no big deal. So now you're getting magnesium, which is an anti-stress mineral, and you're also getting a little bit of quiet time. That's doable for almost everyone. You don't have a bathtub, you don't like taking baths, use a foot bath. Amazon, $25, Epsom salts in your foot bath. Again, lock the door, right? It's not a time to talk about stressful things with your spouse, right? It is a time just for you. And then the third thing that I advocate is, what'd you do like before you were stressed out all the time? What'd you do as a kid? What'd you do before you had kids? What'd you do before you were stressing about the fact that you can't have kids, right? Like, what did you do when life was a little bit more joyful? We tend to suppress those things as well. Don't do that. Take time, 15, 20 minutes throughout your day to do something that you enjoy doing. Do you like going outside and playing volleyball with your daughter? I sure as heck do. So we do it as often as we can. Sometimes I get sweaty and gross and it's not convenient, but I'm like, man, how long is this time going to last? How long are my hips going to last where I can like play volleyball with her, right? Do you like reading? Get a book, go to the library, go to Overdrive, get a free library book. You know what I mean? Do you like painting or sewing or crafting? Or, I just bought like an origami sticker book. How fun is that? Take a little bit of time to disengage from all of the stress, because I'm telling you, no one will do it for you. No one will fix your stress for you. You must be proactive. So those are 3 ways you can be proactive: outside time, bath, and something you love to do, when you were a kid, or that you loved to do before life was stressing you out. Do those proactively, then also go to your doctor, your GP, your OBGYN, and get those markers of inflammation tests done and see just where are you, what's your baseline, right? And then the last thing you can do is really work on your diet. Remove inflammatory substances. Gluten and dairy are the top 2. If you can get those out of the way, you will be smooth sailing. Yes, there are other things you can do to work on diet, and that's what I do. If you need help, get a hold of me. We are running a 28-day reset starting January 6th. So all of these things are kind of taken care of for you on the 28-day reset. Plus you have access to me 24/7. Like, these groups are really fun. We start getting like kind of, competitive in the group, and, like really, really aggressively working on our health. And again, like I said, no one's going to do it for you. So take time, take steps right now to, decide what you're going to do to protect yourself against being one of those statistics. 6 out of 10 women have autoimmune disease. 6 out of 10, 60% of women have autoimmune disease. And that is this generation. Our mom's generation had 1 out of 10. So what is our daughter's generation going to look like? If we don't model those things for our kids now, they're effed. You know what I mean? Like, it's a little scary when you think about it. Not only do we have to think about like school shootings and like, weird things in the media and, culturally, but we also have to like take into account the fact that our kids need to be healthy and strong enough to go out and fight against those things and fight well, right? Have their own families. So, it's not as hard as it feels like. It's not as overwhelming as it feels like once you get started and once you get in the groove. So I'm here to help you if you need help. But those are things you can do on your own for free without me. And hopefully that helps some people. Pass this video along if you feel like it's something that could help somebody you love. And thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate it. All right. Bye.